Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/get-started. That's greenlight.com/get-started.
Hello and welcome to Citation Needed, the podcast where we choose a subject, read a single article about it on Wikipedia, and pretend we're experts. Because this is the internet, that's how it works now. I'm Eli Bosnick, and I'll be your guide among the summits of comedy this evening, but I'll need some Sherpas of chicanery. Noah, Heath, Tom, and Cecil. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast you're on.
Sherpas of Chicanery is the name of my barbershop quartet. We're playing at the Y after your grunge band. So
finally, white male podcasters, the unsung heroes of every journey, getting their due.
Right. Okay, Fentanyl Brownie, the grunge band, is pretty awesome. I feel like you were making fun of it.
Thank you.
Also, fun fact, lots of people use Sherpa to mean like a general term for mountain guide, but it's actually the name of the Himalayan people indigenous to an area near the border of modern-day Nepal and Tibet. And if you look at the graph for the usage of that word over time, it looks like a mountain that starts around 1950. How fun was that fact?
Very fun.
That was a
very fun. Not for them, but
That's
for
true.
everyone else. It's very fun.
I think it's a fun fact.
You know,
Now,
I didn't
before we
capitalize
begin-
Sherpa. He's a bigot.
That's true. And you know those guys have tons of time for podcast listening, so I am burning a bridge I need to stand upon. That's my
Making it worse.
My bad.
All of our Sherpa patrons are
Oh,
dropping off
man.
left and right.
Sherpans. Before we
So
begin
much
tonight,
worse.
I'd like to thank our patrons, especially those of you who are Sherpas. Patrons, without you, we wouldn't be able to venture out on this expensive and dangerous journey called comedy podcasting. You are our guiding light, and without your money, we'd be like the many corpses that line the fallow ranks of iTunes. If you'd like to learn how to join their ranks, be sure to stick around till the end of the show. And with that out of the way, tell us, Tom, what person, place, thing, concept, phenomenon, or event will we be talking about today?
We'll be talking about the first expeditions to Mount Everest today because Cecil's stolen my people who die in the cold bit, I guess.
I
all
do.
right.
People die in the cold too.
All right.
Look, Cecil, you are in a war and you are snapping up the last succulent drops of white guy goes to a cold place to die material before this well runs dry. Are you ready to lead the way?
Well, I would put you on a short rope, Eli, but I want to give you enough so that you can. Well, you know what I was going to say. Forget it.
yeah,
you know.
obviously. Okay. So, what is Mount Everest?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for asking it. Mount Everest is the world's tallest mountain from sea level.
I love all the nerds in our audience that force you to include from sea level in that answer. So you are like, you are my people.
He said from sea level.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. Oh,
Okay.
It's okay. It's okay, darling. Darling, you can come back inside from out of the car. He said from sea level.
It's 8,848 meters tall, or 29,031 feet tall if you're American. The peak of Everest is the typical cruising altitude of a regional jet. Winds on top of the mountain will occasionally reach 170 miles per hour as it interacts with the jet stream at that altitude. It's a pretty dangerous mountain to climb, and 330 people have died trying to summit it. The first recorded time that someone reached the top was 71 years ago today.
Yeah. And we've been watching people fail at that and also show off their ice-crusted snot beards at low-level film festivals ever since. It's great.
Crazy billionaire money. I'm building an escalator up that thing, if only to put REI out of business.
I'll do it.
Mount Everest wasn't always recognized as the tallest mountain on Earth. In fact, some mountains still try to claim highest status. They just measure a little different to do it. For example, Mauna Kea, which is 10,200 meters tall from its base, which is actually on the ocean floor.
Yeah, you're allowed to measure from the base. That's official. We've established that. That's science.
The mountain itself is only 4,205 meters from sea level. If we're talking about height above base range, Denali in Alaska is taller by a couple thousand feet. And if we're talking about distance to the Earth's center,
No one's talking about
then Chimborazo.
No one's talking about it.
I would be talking. I was
Who's the guy
was gonna
talking
say,
about that?
I would be the guy talking about this if
I was
Cecil.
like,
yeah, right.
quarter of this
Okay.
podcast is talking about. Thank
Well, I
you.
don't
Yeah.
like
Sometimes I go, instead of from the base, from the middle of my body and then measure it out. And then
And that's how he gets
Yeah.
the 2 inches.
You're measuring from the
about
taint
right.
or whatever.
What about from behind the taint of the Earth's
Yeah,
center?
exactly,
It's
right? Yeah.
Okay.
So that would be Chimborazo in Ecuador. It's the winner at 6,384 kilometers from the center of the Earth because the Earth bulges at the equator. But if you measure from sea level, Everest beats them all.
Okay, but mountain climbing triathlon, which is what both of those comparisons bring us to, is an awesome idea, right? You swim to the mountain, then you climb the mountain, then you bike down the other side to the center of the earth. I mean, get on this, people.
All right, Eli, I'll do it, but only if I get to wear a chainsaw-proof bear suit on the way.
I know a guy who can get you a bear-proof chainsaw suit if that helps.
There's actually a Swiss guy biked it all the way to Everest, climbed it, and then biked all the way home.
Jesus. Cool.
holy shit.
It
Seriously?
sucks how much you
Ricola
don't
guy.
know his name, huh? Right?
Yeah, I don't, and nobody. Here's the thing: you only know the first person. No one knows anybody else.
And that dude's name is Sally McLady. Yeah,
Bunch of
everyone else is
nameless
just a-
millionaires.
wasted their whole lives. They could have just hugged their dad. Spoilers.
Originally, Kanchenjunga, which is the third highest mountain in the world, was thought to be the highest. And if you're wondering, Kanchenjunga is not K2. That's the second highest mountain, and that's in a different mountain range on the border of Kashmir and China. In 1802, the British began what they called the Great Trigonometrical Survey of India to map the country. They used 500 kilogram theodolites, which are those little viewfinders that you see the surveyors use. But in this case, they needed 12 men to carry them. They tried to enter Nepal to measure the mountains, and they were refused entry. And they thought the project would take about 5 years, and they putted around with these 1,100-pound Viewmasters for a little longer than that. It actually took 70 years.
Jesus.
They could have saved themselves a lot of backaches if they had just respected Nepal's no solicitors or trigonometers sign on the front door.
You just knock. That guy that come up there just point at the sign.
No.
They just don't make me tap it.
Come
Don't
on.
make
Oh,
me
you're a
tap it.
theodolite from
Yeah.
down the block.
Yeah.
You just
I
keep
carry-
walking.
Yeah.
Carried the big binoculars. I thought that might. So heavy.
But an interesting discovery was made when surveying these mountains. Kanchenjunga was measured at 8,582 meters, but another peak was at 8,840 meters. That peak would become what we call Everest. Initially, Everest, quote, was calculated to be 29,000 feet high, but was publicly declared to be 29,002 feet high in order to avoid the impression that an exact height of 29,000 feet was nothing more than a rounded estimate. The
That felt
surveyor,
like a lie when you said it.
the surveyor who is credited with that measurement, Andrew Scott Woe, he's sometimes playfully credited with being the first person to put 2 feet on top of Mount Everest.
Oh, my
And-
God.
I once met a woman at a bar named Jen Smith, so I totally get it. Like, I tried to explain that to a friend of mine.
Your
I was
number's
like, yeah, I met a woman
555?
at the
What?
bar, and he's like, "Oh, what's her name?" And I was like, "Jen Smith," and he's like, "Okay, man, just like you don't have to
Does her
lie.
number
Like,
start with 555?
why
No.
would you make everything up like that?"
Cecil, I love that you are now plumbing the depths of antiquity to bring us historical shit tits, right? Like night soil paps, if you will.
There had to be a moment, though, where Wog was like, and it works out completely even. And everyone in his tent looked at him like he was lying, and he was like, "Oh fuck, you all." Oh no, guys, I really looked through the big binoculars. I promise. It's just insanely unlikely, the thing I'm
It just has to land on zero sometimes. That's just one of the numbers.
It's of the 10. There are 10.
So before I talk about the first summit attempts and successes, I want to talk about what it takes to climb the mountain today. When it comes to technical skill of climbing, Everest isn't the hardest mountain to summit. Many of the ropes are fixed, and a lot of the companies that run climbing tours use Nepalese locals called Sherpas to help carry things, set up tents, cook food, guide climbers to the top. The three things that make Everest difficult to summit are: 1, the elevation, 8,000 meters, is called the death zone. 2, the crowds of people all trying to summit in a tiny window of optimal weather. And 3, the copious amounts of disposable cash you need to actually book an outfitter.
The most deadly hazard of all, capitalism.
Yeah, see, so there's always a part of me that wonders if I've like got what it takes to make it on a climb like that, and then I sleep like in a hotel overnight without packing my own latex pillows, and my neck hurts for a week, and I realize I've never missed a meal in my adult life without pouting about it, and I'm still like, yeah, I could probably do it.
I can totally do it.
probably
Yeah,
do
no, I
it.
feel the same way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like
Okay,
they
I
should
feel
have
like
put
it
the
doesn't
death.
need all three
Probably
reasons,
not.
right? Like death zone, number one, you're
It's a
done
bit
with
of a
reasons.
call-out.
There's a death zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, by the way, I feel like they should put the death zone at 8,002 meters. Like, so it sounds more realistic that way.
Right.
Somebody dies at 7,999 meters, like pussy.
This
You're
is
not even in the
bullshit.
death zone.
His friend drags him up that one extra meter just
That's
so
gonna
he
be
can.
really embarrassing.
Yeah. I don't want to embarrass him. Nobody wants that on their tombstone. All right. So let's talk about high altitude and the death zone. Now, this is above 8,000 meters, like I said before. The atmosphere here is 33% as dense as sea level. So for reference, at sea level, our air is 21% oxygen and 78% nitrogen. At 8,000 meters, the air is pretty much the same composition percentages. There's just only 33% of it. If you just walked straight from sea level to 8,000 meters, you'd die pretty horribly, which is why it takes several weeks to slowly acclimate to the extreme altitudes. In the death zone, you need to breathe more, your heart needs to pump more, and your blood vessels need to expand. And it takes time for your body to adjust.
Okay, just take up smoking. It's so much easier. It's cooler. Going up Everest.
Yeah. Climbers at Everest start out in base camp, which takes 12 to 14 days of walking. It's about 80 miles. Base camp is 5,364 meters or 17,598 feet elevation. And the climbers will spend several weeks here.
Right, I understand the practical reasons for this, but it always seems like cheating to me that they start 60% of the way up the mountain. Right?
Yeah, that's bullshit. I'm mad about it. I just learned that now. I'm fucking mad about that.
Well, I mean, they do climb up to that place, right? Or do they drive there?
No.
No,
Yeah.
they have
No,
to
it sounds
walk.
like they just,
you have
like,
to walk.
cheat
You have to
their way
walk
up to
there.
that.
They
Yeah.
don't. Nobody cheats. You have to walk the whole fucking mountain.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
I'm just
They
picturing now. I'm
helicopter in.
picturing
There's
They
one dude.
helicopter
There's
in.
one dude with like 7 Sherpas and a palanquin, and he's just getting walked up there.
picturing Heath meeting a guy who climbed Everest. Well, half.
You climbed the top there. You climbed the
not
top.
hard.
I did the hard half.
half.
I did the hard part.
Less than half if
you.
you're just,
That guy
doing numbers
Punches
correctly.
him with his frostbitten fingers right in the face. I didn't even feel it.
They break right
Taking
off.
a golf cart up there? Come on. You got to walk the course, man.
So during the time that the climbers spend at base camp, they will climb to various parts of the mountain, sometimes staying at higher elevations for a few nights, and then they come back down. This method of acclimatizing helps climbers get used to the changes in altitude and allows their bodies to adapt to let them live at higher parts of the mountain.
People know you can just kill a bunch of kids, right? You don't have to do this
Jesus
to be
my
memorable.
God.
No, it's just like,
Christ.
I'm just
What?
saying, if you kill a bunch of kids, they'll write your name down. Same.
I hope that's not a callback later because I can delete it. We'll see.
Just do one.
I hope there's not a callback to
Couldn't you
that.
just do a few? Nah.
I think if you do,
You went straight to a bunch. I'm
I
just
think
saying.
if you do more than 6, you're guaranteed to be more famous than anyone except
Okay.
the first guy.
There's no acclimatizing to the death zone, though. The climbers that go to Everest stay outside the death zone until they're ready to summit. They enter the death zone just to get to the top, and then they exit to a lower altitude.
Yeah. Oh, man, that sounds hard. It's just like, so I was at a ski resort and I was in the hot tub and it was a cold day and I jumped out for a second and jumped back in. It sounds really fucking hard. Like that for Everest climbers.
With supplemental oxygen, the human body should not stay in the death zone for more than 20 hours. 2 Sherpas hold the record for longest time surviving the death zone without supplemental oxygen at 21 hours and with supplemental oxygen at 90 hours.
That doesn't feel great, right? That's like learning that the world fasting record goes to some guy's personal chef, right? You really you wanted that to be on purpose.
Cecil, man, I am not an expert on anything at all, actually, but I'm just thinking the human body shouldn't even go to something called the death zone, much less stay there for 20 hours.
Yeah, no.
Like, is the top of Mount Everest covered in winning lottery tickets to give you blowjobs? Why are we going?
It's filled with garbage and probably poop. But I guess
I could stay home if I want.
In the death zone, you're basically suffocating yourself.
So what you're saying is masturbating on top of Everest would be fucking epic.
Your body is fighting to get oxygen distributed. So you're breathing a lot heavier and deeper. Your heart is pumping faster and harder, and all your blood vessels are expanding to get that blood all over your body. Your capillaries cannot expand, though. So sometimes your blood will just leak out inside of you because it can't get to those areas in your body. You don't think so good at higher elevations either. Getting less oxygen is called hypoxia, and the symptoms are dizziness, confusion, difficulty concentrating, and impaired judgment. You can also get a thing called HACE, H-A-C-E, or high altitude cerebral edema, where your brain swells up with fluid. Or you could get HAPE, H-A-P-E, high altitude pulmonary edema, where your lungs fill up with fluid.
I like that they did playful acronyms. That's a nice little pair.
Also, because your blood isn't flowing at the rate it normally does, your extremities get colder quicker, which can lead to frostbite, which can lead to amputations.
Okay, just take up smoking. Again,
So kids aren't even fast. Exactly. You can just
stop relating our takes. Absolutely not.
Yes, ending. Together.
At those kind of heights, you can lose consciousness, and this can happen without warning. You can also experience organ damage or organ failure. Lack of oxygen can also cause you to have hypoxic seizures, which are pretty much self-explanatory. At high elevation, you can also have a hard time consuming water or food because your body's basically shutting down. So many people experience dehydration and malnutrition. Also, at that height and activity level, you can burn about 6,000 to 10,000 calories a day, which is like 3 English breakfasts in metric.
Wrong. The English breakfast is so foul it cannot be eating. That is a 0-calorie meal.
Okay. I love an English.
No, you
Thank
don't.
you.
Not
Unrelatable.
tomato.
Baked beans and a tomato?
Mushrooms
tomato
are
can
delicious.
None of that.
But like also the other stuff.
Yeah,
more
all the other
importantly.
stuff.
A slice of ham that pretends to be
Really
bacon.
overcooked
Liar's
egg, yeah,
ham.
that's delicious.
Liar's bacon. No.
Yeah, that's bullshit. It's
Yeah,
not
we've
bacon.
already.
Like
What
that
have
part,
we what have we got left here? There's the baked beans are out. The tomatoes out. You got liar's bacon. Where are we at?
No, baked
Eggs.
beans
You
are
just
good.
said eggs.
Ham's
The eggs
good.
are
Eggs are good.
overcooked. They're only cooked on one. I mean, you
Listen,
can make a better
the
summer
English
sunny side
cuisine
up.
doesn't have much. Just let them have this one thing, Tom.
I'm not giving up on this. No.
Heath calls me liar's ham on the Discord.
In lots of cases today, the crowded nature of Everest Base Camp, which lacks proper sanitation, can lead to a lot of stomach illnesses in the climbers. So keeping anything down at lower altitudes even can be a challenge.
Cut to me at base camp explaining to the medics that this is normal for me. They're trying to get me onto a chopper.
The window to climb Everest is short. There's a week to 2 weeks every May and every September to summit. The rest of the year, the top of Everest is inside the jet stream, or it's in the middle of a snowstorm. The weather is pretty horrific. Even in optimal climbing conditions, the temperatures are at negative 15 Fahrenheit or negative 26 Celsius without any wind chill.
My dumbass read that in your notes, Cecil, and I thought, why wouldn't there be any wind chill?
There's also significantly less UV protection. While much of your body is covered in thick clothing, your eyes quickly become damaged. The effect is amplified by the snow because it reflects the sunlight, and you can become what they call snowblind.
Gee, terrible stuff, Cecil. Hey, I'm going to go out on a limb here and just say I'm betting those outfitters get the full deposit up front.
Yeah.
You bet.
No half
you bet.
now, half later.
No.
You bet. You bet. Modern climbers have lots of very refined equipment that makes it very lightweight and durable. Modern ropes are lighter and can handle more weight. Crampons are lighter and more durable. Clothing and boots are sturdier, lighter weight, and more insulated. Base layering and underlayers are lighter and warmer. All the camping equipment can handle high winds, cold temperatures. It's lightweight. Modern toe warmers and hand warmers, lighter oxygen setups, and better masks make climbing much easier than it was for the very first summits.
All right. Well, sounds like things are growing ever closer to the temperature-controlled bubble with Netflix. I would need to do this shit. So while I open an account at Gander Mountain, we'll take a quick break for a little apropos of nothing.
Hi, I'm Tom Curry.
And I'm Eli Bosnick. Does your heart burst with desire for adventure?
Do you long to experience the extreme, push the edge, find the limits of the human condition?
Introducing therapy. This extreme mental sport is a great way to push the limits and also maybe stop doing expensive, deadly stuff with your one precious life.
Just listen to these satisfied customers.
I was the world's most daring free solo climber, but thanks to therapy, I realized my dad just should have been nicer to me.
For therapy, I long to discover the Kuratoa Mountains of Bongalai. But thanks to therapy, now I'm just divorced.
Therapy, because you should not want to do those things under any circumstances.
Okay, but what if
Just call your dad.
Yeah, fine. Calling.
Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/get-started. That's greenlight.com/get-started.
And we're back. When we left off, you shouldn't try climbing Mount Everest. Now. And in the past, things were even shouldn't-er. What say you, Cecil?
Very true. Super concise, Eli.
Thank
The first
you.
group to try to summit Everest was George Mallory's British Mount Everest Reconnaissance Expedition in 1921. Sort of wandered around the base like a dog looking for somewhere to pee and then just decided to give up. One of the members of the expedition suffered from frostbite. The winds were gale force and they decided just to try next year. At this point, even though the climbing was a failure, nobody died yet.
And can I say,
Spoiler.
good for them. It takes a lot of balls to go to the base of Mount Everest and be like, hey, you know what? Fuck this. Albert's toes hurt. Let's just not. Just fucking not.
In 1922, Mallory returned and led another group to Everest, hoping to summit. On May 20th, the team began their ascent from Camp 4 at 23,000 feet on the North Col without supplemental oxygen. They planned to camp at 26,000 feet, and they were using porters to help with carrying equipment. But as it started getting dark, they decided to camp at 25,000 feet and let the porters descend to their camp. The next day, the weather was terrible, so they decided to start late. One of the climbers had frostbite. He decided to sleep in, try not to summit.
Hey, guys, I'm going to take a self-care day. Maybe get a little, I don't know. I'm hitting the snooze. I'm going to get a little brunch after this. You go without me.
You just wake up. Yeah. Oh, got myself some frostbite. Nothing a little lie-in won't fix, though.
Hey, yeah, like I feel like the frostbite decided he wasn't going to try to summit.
Yeah. They estimated how much they had to climb, and they knew they had to keep a certain rate to stay on schedule to reach the top and return while it was still light out. But as they neared 8,225 meters, they knew they were too far behind schedule and decided to descend. This was the highest any recorded climber had ever gone, but it was still not the peak of Everest. As the climbers were descending, one of the team slipped and he basically knocked down two other guys, and they all started sliding toward the edge of a glacier with a 1,000-foot drop-off. Mallory jammed his ice axe into the ground and he wrapped the safety line around it, stopping their fall and saved them.
Okay.
I'm picturing British Stallone being like,
I know that's a cool thing to do, but I bet he made the rest of that climb unbearable. And then I was like, whatcha, I got you.
yeah, man, we were there.
We all were.
It's just, you read about heroism in like books and stuff, and then you're actually the one doing it,
Dude, this expedition was your idea. It's dangerous and we almost died. This is not a win for you.
Seriously, man.
Okay, guys, this is not the way to talk to your best friend. Like, are you hearing?
You're not our best friend, man.
It saved your life.
From you!
Still.
They tried again 7 days later in May of 1922. This time they decided to actually use supplemental oxygen. Now, it's important to understand that these people had primitive and heavy oxygen tanks that were fickle and didn't work properly.
I'm not the only person imagining them just like sticking their legs out of an iron lung Flintstone style.
Yeah.
They were also just in like wool sports coats. If you see a photo of these guys, they look like they're going to teach a humanities class at a state college, not climb a mountain. I'm not kidding.
It's not great.
I looked it up. It's so silly looking. It's like Jersey dudes, the ski mountain with the cargo shorts from Old Navy and like a black leather jacket, but like British
It's how
climber.
I picture all of Heath's college friends will dress at his wedding.
Yeah, that's how you should picture that.
They were
That's
showing
happening.
at one point, they were showing like all the high technology that the 1950s people eventually climbed it with. And one of them wore like, no shit, a crocheted undershirt. And that was like, everybody's like, whoa, no way, bro. Like, it's insane. All right. So the next attempt was George Finch, Jeffrey Bruce, and Tebjur Bura. They were planning on having Bura carry the oxygen up to 27,000 feet, but he collapsed at 26,000. So the other two carried what they could, and they sent Burra back down. The pair made it farther than the original group did the week prior at 8,321 meters, but the pair knew they wouldn't make the summit, so they decided to descend.
Oh, Cecil, I must have misread the episode title. You're calling this one A Bunch of Fucking Quitters? Is that what this one's called?
They tried to ascend one more time 2 weeks later, getting close to Camp 4, and then, quote, an avalanche began on an ice cliff above them and swept over the entire group. 4 members of the team and the porter managed to dig out from beneath the snow and saw a group of 4 porters approximately 150 feet below them gesturing down the slope. The avalanche had swept the other 9 porters into a crevasse. The remaining team members immediately began a search and rescue effort, eventually finding 8 of the 9 porters. Only 2 had survived. They built a small memorial and went home defeated, end quote.
What a tease of a way to present that, though, right? Like they're like, well, they found 8 of the 9 of them, and you're like, oh, well, that's way better than I expected. And then it's like, mostly they were corpses, though, as it turns out. Damn, man.
They came back the following year.
Come on, you gotta stop. What has to go wrong to call it?
We found 8 out of 9 of them. This is our fucking year.
The first ascent of Everest that year was not even remotely successful. They had planned to set up camps all the way up, and they didn't make it up as high as planned, and they had to head back down. They passed the second group on the way down as they were heading up. This group was Howard Somerville and Edward Norton. They reached Camp 4 at 25,200 feet by 1 p.m. They spent the night there. They climbed to Camp 5 the next day, but they lost 2 porters to an injury on the way up, and they had to send them back down. The next morning at 6:30 a.m., the 2 attempted the summit. At a certain point, Somerville can't breathe, so he sends Norton on, and he waits for him. Norton continues, but gets dizzy and has vision problems, so he comes back down.
Jesus Christ.
So trigger warning if you're grossed out by bodies falling apart at high altitude.
Okay, Cecil, when a trigger warning is graphic enough that it needs its own trigger warning, it's defeating the purpose.
Hey, if you're not grossed out by bodies falling apart at high altitude, why don't you just go ahead and buy Feeling Good by David Brooks? David Burns.
And if you're only grossed out by that happening at low altitude, that's a weird line.
Thank you.
It's a really weird line.
All right, so here we go. On the way back down, quote, during their descent of the North Ridge at around 25,000 feet, Somerville experienced intense coughing and dislodged something in his throat, severely obstructing his breathing. He was close to death and saved his own life by forcibly pressing on his chest with both hands, dislodging the obstruction that came into his mouth and coughing up blood. The obstruction was a slough from the mucous membrane lining of his larynx caused by frostbite, end quote.
Jesus, fuck.
See, that's another downside to this shit, Mr. Potential Climber. Maybe you're chiseled into history as the first man to climb Everest. But maybe Wikipedia tells the rest of history forever about you hawking the world's most deadly loogie. Huh? You think his name comes up with anything other than loogie guy for the rest of eternity? The fucking chronomancers who stepped through a portal to see where we went wrong after the fallout clears are going to be like, and that guy coughed up his throat. Gross. Gross, that guy's dreams.
What
You should call us dad.
he fucking Heimlicked his own throat out of him. He's like, hey, boss,
he totally Heimlicked himself.
hey, boss, I got frostbite inside of me.
Right?
I don't feel like that's okay. That can't be. That's the warmest spot that I'll have is inside of me.
Yeah. So for the final attempt that year,
Come on. See, there's another? Was the dead larynx not a big enough piece to shut this down? What is happening? Slough of dead larynx feels like a deal breaker.
does.
If you
Right.
say
Does.
that phrase,
Does.
you're done
Does.
with whatever you were doing.
Cecil, is the entire mountain just like littered with frostbitten dicks that have fallen off? How is anybody
and giant radioactive loogies. I don't know,
Yeah,
man.
right?
I don't know.
intact? I guess.
I don't know. Andrew
That's the third
Irvine.
name for our band, by the way, Radioactive Loogies. We broke up, we got back together. My friend Chris is in it now. Now we're Radioactive Loogies.
It's a different artistic direction.
Thank
It's pretty cool.
you.
So Andrew Irvine and George Mallory made their way up to the mountain with oxygen and were accompanied by 8 porters.
Well, we've actually got a great track record of finding our porters after accidents. So, what do you mean, how alive? That's not. No follow-ups.
Sherpa is actually an indigenous word. Oh, you're gone.
We made him a really nice memorial.
Hold on. Was that a fun fact you had? It sounded fun.
So they sent 4 porters back down to Camp 4 from Camp 5 with the note, quote, "There is no wind here and things look hopeful," end quote. Cue ominous music.
Mhm.
They left on the morning of June 7th, 1924. They ascended to Camp 6, which was 8,138 meters. On the following morning, Mallory and Irvine climbed up to the summit, or tried to climb up to the summit, where they were last seen on the mountain at 12:50 p.m., continuing upward. This would be the last time they were seen alive. The weather turned and they never came back down. There's some people who speculate that they made it all the way to summit and then they just died on the way back down. Thus, they're the actual first to summit. But I tend to agree with the other side that says, I don't care if you make it all the way back up. You have to make it all the way back down for it to count. You got to be alive. Otherwise, it's just a really expensive practice.
Yeah, pictures and don't die or get the fuck out. Absolutely, that does not count. Especially if your reason for trying to scale Mount Everest was because it's
That's a quote from Mallory.
That is
yeah,
Mallory's
yeah.
actual
That's
answer.
his quote, yeah. After Mallory and Irvine's death, there would be a few attempts at the mountain, but none were successful. Instead, the world would have to wait 30 years for a group to come close. Mallory and Irvine had tried to come through Tibet to climb the mountain. Mallory did not think that the route through Nepal was possible and had famously called the Khumbu icefall, quote, terribly steep and broken, end quote. And he's right. It's 5 kilometers of constantly shifting glacial ice, but it didn't matter much anyway because the Nepalese government had closed off the route and wouldn't grant any attempts for decades. And while some tried to go up via the North Face through Tibet, none were successful. But in 1952, a group came even closer to the summit when Nepal allowed an expedition to give it a go.
Yeah, Nepal finally gives in. It's like, hey, man, I was just trying to save you from like puking up your own frostbitten ball sack. But if you're going to insist on speaking to the manager, go on ahead.
Go right ahead. Right ahead. In 1952, the Swiss Mount Everest expedition, led by Edouard Weiss-Dunant, tried to summit through Nepal. They made it up to the South Col, which is where the last camp is normally set. And two climbers, Raymond Lambert and Sherpa Tenzing Norgay, were able to climb to 8,895 meters on the southeast ridge, breaking the record of the Mallory expedition, but not actually summiting the mountain. They spent the night there without sleeping bags, without a stove, forced to melt snow over a candle for a paltry amount of water.
But why a paltry amount? I mean, there's plenty of snow.
There's not enough fire.
Just do a paltry amount. It'll look better in the wiki.
Problem. Yeah.
Oh,
They had problems with their oxygen and they couldn't get it to work properly, but the men tried their damnedest, even crawling on all fours at some point to try to make it to the top.
Okay, if we stay low, the air's a little thicker. Is that what you said? I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I get it though. One time I ordered ice cream from DoorDash and the delivery guy set it down sideways and then the melty bits kind of leaked over the inside of my bag. And I guess the fucking worst.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is I too know true hardship.
right.
That's why I never tip on DoorDash because you never know when they're going to do that to you.
I'm really sorry about that.
The man to finally summit Everest, Edmund Hillary, saw their encampment and he had this to say about it. Quote, an incredibly lonely sight. The battered framework of the tent that Tenzing and Raymond Lambert of the 1952 Swiss expedition pitched over a year before, and where they had spent an extremely uncomfortable night without food, without drink, and without sleeping bags. What a tough couple they had been, but perhaps not very well organized, end quote. Hillary thought that Tenzing and Lambert were not sufficiently hydrated, having relied on cheese and snow melted over a candle for sustenance, and he insisted on everyone keeping their fluids up by melting snow over a Primus stove for water, end quote.
And as I pass into history, I thought to myself, man, those guys sucked at the thing I'm doing. I'm writing this down and literally everyone will read it.
I love that Hillary agreed with my joke about the candle.
He did. Oh, look, it's that guy's throat loogie. That guy's gross, right? Ugh. Just want to take a moment to really cement his position as yucko.
The next year, the British expedition tried to climb the mountain. They established camps on the mountain like other groups, and the leader had chosen Tom Bourdillon and Charles Evans to attempt to summit first. They made it to the South Summit, which is not the main summit, by 1 p.m., and they didn't make it across the rock step that connects the South Summit with the actual summit. They had a problem with the oxygen, and it took too long to fix, and they had to turn back 100 meters from the summit.
Oh. All right, I've got an idea. I'm going to hack up some dead larynx, like a slough of that, and throw it. That'll count, right? We get the credit.
Still me. That's still me. The next climbing pair was the New Zealander, Edmund Hillary, and Sherpa Tenzing Norgay, who had accompanied the Swiss expedition the year before. They made it to the South Summit and then traversed the step to the summit. That step is still named for Edmund Hillary, the Hillary Step. They made it to the top at 11:30 a.m. on May 29th, 1953. They took some pictures of the top and they buried some candy and a small cross in the snow. And they had taken their oxygen off for about 10 minutes up there. And Hillary said, quote, he was becoming rather clumsy-fingered and slow-moving, end quote. So they came back down. And when they came back to camp, Hillary is said to have told another mountaineer, George Lowell, well, George, we knocked the bastard off.
Are we sure that wasn't a reference to a third guy that went up with them? Or,
I like that at the very tip, they took off their protection just to see how it would feel.
right?
And apparently they did some finger stuff.
Yeah, they were clumsily fingering
I'm clumsy
things too.
with my fingering right now. You guys noticed that, right?
I'm seductively clumsy.
I didn't want to say anything.
Just letting you
yeah,
know.
I felt,
yeah.
Tenzing, it looks like I'm not going to be able to show you that magic trick after all. We'll never know your card.
After the accolades started coming in, a controversy started. Who was the first up Everest? Was it Tenzing or was it Hillary? Though the team had tried to pass off this question and say it was a team effort, a lot of the press in India where Tenzing was from wanted to confirm that it was Tenzing. Quote, in Kathmandu, a large banner depicted Tenzing pulling a semi-conscious Hillary to the summit. Tenzing eventually ended the speculation by revealing in his 1955 ghostwritten autobiography, Man of Everest, that Hillary was first, end quote.
All right. And if you had to summarize what you learned in one sentence, what would it be?
If you're ever climbing anything and you cough up part of you, just stop. Just quit. Just don't do it.
And are you ready for the quiz?
I am. Let's do this.
All right, Cecil, I took a look around and you can go online and book a climbing trip right now for Everest. So what is required to book this trip? A, around $100,000 all in for flights, Sherpas, food, etc. By the way,
about right.
vegan meals are offered.
Ooh, nice.
In case that was what was holding you back, Eli.
That was. Thank you.
B, about 2 months of your life, which is the average time to summit, including acclimatizing at altitude. C, evidence that you have experience climbing mountains.
Nope.
D, C is not the answer. Seriously, you do not have to provide any evidence that you have ever actually climbed anything before at all. It is suggested, but not required. Also, E, 5% of people who attempt this climb will die every year. And F, there are no blowjob lottery tickets at the top. None. Nowhere does it say it.
Yeah, I don't think they care about fucking like C at all because $100,000 check already cashed. Yeah. So everything. I guess it's all of the above.
All of the above. It is all of the above.
Because you said C is not the answer.
Secret answer
Yeah.
G or whatever.
All right, Cecil, I got another one for you. Edmund Hillary, big name, but almost nobody has heard of Tenzing Norgay.
Yeah, Tenzing
Even though
Norgay.
Norgay was
What's up,
clearly
baby?
the one who deserves most of the credit. I feel like
probably.
he threw the
Almost
guy
certainly.
to the top and it was like,
He
Hillary made it first.
Probably carried him on his back, like piggybacked him up there.
Right. So you mentioned his ghostwritten autobiography. Which of the following would be a better title for his book about Edmund Hillary clearly stealing the fame? A, The Height Supremacist. B, Whitewashing Offensive. Whitewashing Offense.
Phenomenal.
Tom Sawyer thing. C, Everest Control.
that's good.
D,
That's so good.
You Sherpa Nepalese guy didn't make it all happen. Sherpa.
It's a toss-up between A and C. I'm going to go with A, height supremacist. So good.
That is correct. Well done.
All right, I have one for you, Cecil. Nobody should ever have to go after Heath in a pun-making exhibition. Why
That's
is
true.
that? A, Heath thinks entirely in puns.
He does.
B, Heath was trained by ancient pun monks in a mountaintop temple or something. C,
called
Heath
punks.
puts... Wait, of course they are, yeah. Heath puts way more thought into this part of the show than me. Or D, who am I kidding? No amount of thought would have equaled the height supremacist. I just don't have that in me.
I think C gets me into an argument. So I'm going to go with D. Who am I
It
kidding?
is D. Actually, yeah.
All right. Well, I didn't do this part of the show, so I win. And so I want a Noah essay next week.
All right. Well, there you go.
All right. Well, for Cecil, Noah, Tom, and Heath, I'm Eli Bosnick. Thanking you for hanging out with us today. We'll be back next week. And by then, Noah will be an expert on something else. Between now and then, you can watch our other podcasts on your podcast player. And if you like,
watch them.
you
Listen.
can watch them. You
You could watch them show up. Or
That's right.
Download,
And there's the little
watch them
stick
download.
that moves along the time thing. It's not a good
Eli
show.
spends a lot of time watching waveforms. It's really weird.
And if you'd like to help keep this show going and get pre-show patron-only shenanigans, you can make a per-episode donation at patreon.com/citationpod or leave us a 5-star review everywhere you can. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, check out past episodes, connect with us on social media, or check the show notes. Be sure to check out citationpod.com.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/get-started. That's GREENLIGHT.com/get started.